Welcome, everyone. Israel's military says around 250 rockets have been fired by Hezbollah across the border from Lebanon, marking one of the heaviest bombardments of Israel since fighting intensified in September. Several people are injured and buildings damaged in northern and central Israel, some of them near Tel Aviv. The attacks followed an Israeli strike on central Beirut on Saturday, in which the Lebanese health ministry said 29 people were killed. Also on Sunday, Israeli media widely reported that Israel and Lebanon were moving towards a ceasefire agreement to end the fighting with the Iran-backed militia Hezbollah. While Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei believes that death sentences should be issued on Israeli leaders for their actions in Gaza and Lebanon instead of mere arrest warrants. Mr. Khamenei's comments come after the International Criminal Court issued arrest warrants for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, his former defense chief Yoav Gallant, and Hamas leader Ibrahim el-Masri. Speaking at an event in Iran's capital, Tehran, the supreme leader said, in his words, the actions of Israeli officials are taken are not a victory. They are war crimes. Issuing Mr. Netanyahu's arrest warrant is not enough. His execution warrant must also be issued. According to ICC judges, there were reasonable grounds to believe Israeli officials were criminally responsible for acts including murder, persecution and starvation as a weapon of war as part of a widespread and systematic attack against civilian populations in Gaza. The decision was met with outrage in Israel, which called it shameful and absurd. Gaza residents expressed hope that it will help end the violence and bring those responsible for war crimes to justice. While Lebanon has condemned a recent attack on the United Nations interim force base in south of the country, it comes as the UN peacekeeping agency in southern Lebanon said 4 Italian soldiers were injured in a rocket attack on one of its bases, which were likely launched by Hezbollah or affiliates of the armed group. The Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni expressed profound indignation over the news and said such attacks were unacceptable. Speaking at a conference in Rome, Lebanese Foreign Minister Abdallah Abu Habib called on all sides to prioritize the safety of peacekeepers in combat zones.
Lebanon strongly condemns any attack on UNIFIL and calls on all sides to respect the safety, security of the troops and their premises. Moreover, Lebanon condemns recent attack on the Italian contingent and deplores such unjustified hostilities.
And from the Middle East, we draw attention to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, where one child has been injured after Russia launched an attack on Ukrainian city of Zaporizhzhia. According to the regional governor, Ivan Fedorov, Russia launched tens of drones overnight in an attack that damaged multiple industrial facilities and a residential block. The governor, Mykolaiv Kim, said power has been restored in the southern region after Russian forces attacked energy infrastructure, causing blackouts. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said on Sunday that Russia used around 460 drones and over 20 missiles to attack Ukraine in the past week. Meanwhile, at least 23 people have been injured following Russian missile attacks on Ukraine's eastern city of Kharkiv, according to the national police. The strike also damaged over 40 residential buildings, one of which was the Center for Administrative Services. Of the 146 drones used overnight, Ukraine's air defenses shot down 71 and lost track of more, likely due to electronic warfare measures used against them. In the meantime, 10 people were injured after a Russian missile attack on the southern city of Odessa damaged residential buildings. Eyewitnesses say the strike, which hit a residential area, was home to a lot of pensioners. The attack also left cars and 2 educational institutions badly damaged. And Ukraine Security Service is investigating debris from a new Russian ballistic missile that hit the Ukrainian city of Dnipro last week. Ukraine, in its first public assessment of the new weapon, said the Russian missile that struck the city reached a top speed of more than 13,000 kilometers per hour and took about 15 minutes to reach its target from the launch. Russian President Vladimir Putin confirmed his country responded to the use of US and British missiles by firing a new kind of hypersonic medium-range ballistic missile called Orshnik as a warning to the West against supporting Ukraine's war effort, indicating that many more could follow. Kyiv initially suggested Russia had fired an intercontinental ballistic missile, but US officials and NATO echoed Mr. Putin's description of the weapon as an intermediate-range ballistic missile. And U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is in Italy to attend the Group of 7 foreign ministers meeting amid rising tensions between Russia and Ukraine. Mr. Blinken, who touched down in Fiji on Sunday, came down from the plane holding his children's hands. Last week, G7 leaders reiterated a pledge to keep imposing severe sanctions on Russia for its invasion of Ukraine, export controls and other measures, and vowed to support Kyiv for as long as it takes. According to the State Department, Mr. Blinken will discuss issues including conflicts in the Middle East, Russia's war against Ukraine, Indo-Pacific security, and the ongoing crisis in Haiti and in Sudan. Italy holds the 2024 rotating presidency of the G7, which also includes the United States, Canada, Japan, France, Germany, and Britain. Let's get more perspective on this. President Emeritus Corporate Council on Africa, Stephen Hayes, joins us now to discuss this. Great to see you again, Stephen. Right. Let's first begin with the G7 leaders meeting taking place in Italy. We see the just concluded G20 meeting in Brazil. Many wonder if this is yet another gathering of world leaders without any concrete outcome. What do you envisage will come out of this summit?
Well, I think the number one topic is going to be and is Ukraine. It's the next less than 2 months, President Trump will come in, or more appropriately, President Biden will be gone, and therefore there's got to be a lot of decisions on what to do about Ukraine in the next less than 60 days. So I think that's by far the number one subject. The Middle East will be a subject as well, but particularly Ukraine in this case.
And let's get your reactions to President Joe Biden's green light to allow Ukraine use U.S. long-range missiles to strike deep inside Russia. We see Russia also striking back almost immediately with a new intermediate-range ballistic missile. What do you make of the whole war trajectory?
Well, it obviously elevates the war, but I think that was already done when Mr. Putin decided to bring North Korean troops in. That clearly expands the war beyond Russia, Ukraine, and using those troops to attack Ukraine is, I think, outrageous. So I think something had to be done in response to that. To sit by and do nothing just further erodes U.S. Credibility and, frankly, UK and NATO credibility as well. So the missiles do and have incited Russia, but I always find it interesting that Mr. Putin has taken no responsibility for the initiating the war and no responsibility for bringing North Korean troops in. And so I think something had to be done. Now, whether this was the right response, I don't know. I think it's a bit late. I think they should have done this earlier, frankly, because in 2 months' time, Mr. Trump may undercut all of that. We just don't know yet.
Right, and Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky says Russia's use of a new ballistic missile on Dnipro shows a clear and severe escalation of the war. President Putin, on the other hand, has said that the Ukraine war was escalating towards a global conflict after the United States and Britain allowed Ukraine to hit Russia with their weapons. Is there any hope for a peace deal anytime soon?
Well, anytime soon, let's say within 90 days, perhaps. It depends on what Mr. Trump does when he comes into office. I don't see. I think it's highly unlikely that there'll be a peace deal between now and the time that President Trump comes in. It's not Mr. Putin's interest to help Mr. Trump, and clearly he has strong belief that there's going to be something working in his favor. He's even said the U.S. can mediate the peace talks with Mr. Trump in place. So that would give a clear, well, let's say is likely to give a clear advantage to Russia because of the relationship between Trump and Putin. So I don't think you're going to see much change in the next 60 days. It's really now the next 60 days is trying to decide what NATO can do, how much independence it's going to have if Mr. Trump moves NATO and tries to move NATO in another direction. So right. I think it's going to be a tough 60 days for Ukraine.
Right. How do you envisage the next 60 days? Do you think Russia will respond further with strikes, and what are the potential escalation risks, and how might Ukraine adapt its air defenses or military posture in response to this?
Well, I think that what you're going to see is a continuing heavy pressure from Russia with drones, short-range missiles, maybe use the hypersonic missile that it has sometimes. I can't take seriously that Mr. Putin would actually use nuclear weapons that would outrage the entire world. And then that really would raise some serious questions about World War III. Mr. Trump has been, and his allies have been arguing that World War III is close. And I think that he's making that argument to enhance his own credibility or his own credibility for the future. I don't think we're close to that yet. There's always that possibility if it continues to escalate. But I think really the escalation was done by Russia, not only just initiating the invasion itself, and there are some valid points on the Russian side as to why they felt they needed to, but also the inclusion of North Korean troops is really clearly an international escalation.
And what implications does this have for NATO-Russia relations and, European security? You just spoke of international escalation there. NATO also says Russia's use of the weapon will not change the course of the conflict. Do you agree with this?
Well, I think that Russia has an overwhelming force right now, if not quite overwhelming, perhaps, but the stronger force and better equipment. It really depends on how much NATO commitment is to continue the support of Ukraine. I think it's quite a bit, but they may have to continue that support without the endorsement of President Trump. So I think it's just going to be very, very complicated. President Trump has promised to, in typical Trumpian fashion, promised to end the war in one day. We'll see, and we'll see what that means. But negotiations take more than one day.
Stephen, thank you for your time.
Thank you. An honor.